Hello, this is Bruce McCluggage. I teach philosophy at Pikes Community College. We're here today with a special program that we're doing called Visions of Death, but we're really going to learn a lot about living through this session as well. We have a special guest with us today, Dr. Steve Alsam. He's with Pikes Peak Hospital. Hospice, yes. Chaplain there, and I'll be asking him several of the questions that we'll be covering for today. Steve, I wanted to start off a little bit. We had a tremendous program last night at our theater here at Pikes Peak Community College. We went for about 2.5 hours or something along those lines. It's going to be kind of hard to condense it into half an hour today, but just wanted to kick off. How did you get involved with the hospice care, being a chaplain, this type of work?
I began as a pastor for 27 years, senior pastor in different parts of the country, though I'm a native of Colorado. When I no longer wanted to do that, I started looking for alternatives in my career. So I just started, I just kind of tripped into it, I suppose. Along with that was a great interest I've always had in philosophy. I've studied philosophy. I still read a lot of philosophy. And then I start encountering people where the philosophy actually met the road, especially people near death. They become very honest, and the existential reality is right in front of their face. And from that, then you begin to get all kinds of experiences that really changed my belief system. So I just keep eating it up.
Excellent. Thanks for that little summary of how you became involved, and I'm sure that's naturally going to come out as we go a little bit more today. It's one thing to start, it's another thing to continue and finish all the way through. Being a hospice chaplain, we had another speaker last night too. He was your psychiatrist friend, Mitch Leister. How did you become engaged with him, partnering with him? You do these presentations together, but how have you two worked together in terms of your current research?
Our research, actually, we just became mutual friends. We were sharing a part of a dinner group together, and we both expressed interest. Mitch and I started meeting for breakfast on Monday mornings up in Monument, not too far from his office. And it was amazing. On the first time we got together, we started talking about our near-death interests and the like. We both had our watches stopped for 13 minutes exactly. He called me up and said, my watch stopped for 13 minutes. And I said, so did mine. So we knew we were in a different realm of energy, and I don't know what that was about, but it's pretty fascinating. We've been meeting every Monday, or nearly every Monday, for the last 5 years, and also other times. But we've included now two PhD, very intelligent physicists and an artist, and they've been challenging the science on us, keeping us honest. Otherwise, we'd say we'd probably drift off into woo-woo land. So,
thanks for being honest there with us.
Yeah.
This could be seen as a controversial topic, near-death experiences, death-related visions. It's kind of hard to keep track of maybe the different kinds that are out there. Could you run through that with us a little bit? Explain that a little bit more for us.
In our experiences, not only in our experiences, but from the different books we've read and all the media, we realize there are probably 5 different types of near-death experiences. The first is deathbed visions. When somebody is getting close to death, they begin to see loved ones. They begin to see sometimes the life beyond. Actually, about 90% of our hospice patients begin to see loved ones. And they at first feel very awkward about it. And then they start to see they're safe, and they'll start talking about it and say, yeah, there's my wife, I can't wait to see her. Or sometimes it's even a pet. They remember a dog. The next one is near-death visions that are people who have had a traumatic event like a heart attack or an accident, and their soul leaves their bodies. There's been a lot in the media in the last few years on this. Eben Alexander and a few others have made it into popular television now. These are the people who come back, and they always regret having to come back, and they report what they see. Probably about 5 to 15% of the people have negative experiences, but the other 85% say they are amazing experiences they can't wait to go back to. The next one is peri-death visions. It's what happens around the time of death, that loved ones are start to sense that this is going to happen. The one I like to talk about is the gentleman that we served who said, I can't die yet because I don't have a boarding pass. Instead of boarding pass, he says, I lost my boarding pass, I can't die yet. And he's into another world in his own mind, a boarding pass. So our volunteer services created one on the computer, and we brought it to him and said, tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, you can board. And he was so happy and so relieved in that 7 o'clock the next morning to the moment he left, he died.
Wow.
Those are the kind of experiences we call peri-death.
Wow.
The next one is after-death visions. People are visited by loved ones who died, usually within 3 or 4 days afterwards, although it can go on for a long time. I've had people tell me that they can smell their mother's perfume, for instance, even years afterwards when they're in a stressful situation, or maybe it's a piano recital for their grandchild. They say, oh, I wish Grandma was here. And they start to smell Grandma's perfume because she let it be known, I'll be there. And different people give different indications that they are there. And the fifth one is very interesting. It's called a shared death vision. It really had not been noticed until 3 years ago by Raymond Moody, who is the pioneer of near-death experiences. It's when somebody who's still living travels a part of the journey along with somebody who has died. They walk side by side. They might go through the tunnel of light. They might go up to the life review, and they get to share part of it with another person. Some people said they don't want to go that direction, and other people said, it was such a blessing to go. I had one patient who said, I was in my room waiting for my husband to die, and she was napping, and she said the whole room changed colors. It went green, and the dimensions all changed, and she started hearing music, and then the person attending her husband came and woke her up and said, your husband just died. She says, I know. And she called me up and said, Steve, what's going on? So I had to let her know. I think he just had a shared death experience. You were partway with him.
Yes.
So,
Steve, I'm wondering, what are some personal near-death? Have you experienced any of these, say, more personally for yourself at all?
good question. Only when I've been with people who have seen near death. One gentleman I was with, he had been not responding all day, and I went to visit him and his wife, and when I sat down to say goodbye to him, I knew it was his last day on earth. He woke up and he looked at me and he said, Steve, you ought to see it. You ought to see how beautiful it is and the music. And it was just incredible. He said, you ought to see the colors. I can see colors I couldn't see with my eyes because the spectrum is so limited. And I felt like I was there with him. And then he said the most amusing thing. He said, and you came with me. Look it. And I said, no, I'm not with you. I'm at the door with you. But I'm so privileged to have this part with you.
Steve, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. We're going to hear some more of these stories, so stay with us.
All right.
Great. Okay, excellent. Really great. Mom, I gotta let you go. Pull over right now. Get back here. Come on, son. Got him.
Put your nightmares to rest. PPCC's flexible online evening and weekend classes are a dream come true.
Hi, welcome back. We're with Steve Alsam. I'm Bruce McCluggage. We're here at Pikes Peak Community College. We're talking about near-death visions and death-related visions with Steve Alsam. He's a hospice worker at Pikes Peak. Tell me again, Steve.
Pikes Peak Hospice and Palliative Care.
That's why I had him say it. Okay, so Steve, tell us a little bit more about death-related visions, and maybe some of the effects of death-related visions that you've seen that you think our audience would be interested in.
I'm going to refer to two of them. The one that the patients experience prior to death. It's been a huge comfort when they begin to see loved ones or they see pets who have passed before them. At first, they're a little nervous about it. They think nobody's going to really notice or pay attention to them. They're going to think I'm crazy if I say, "Hey, there's Uncle Fred," or "There's my wife," or "I see an angel." And some people see angels, or "I see Jesus," or "I see Buddha." But they've learned we learn how to read those signs in hospice care, certainly. We tell them, don't worry, what you're doing, what you're experiencing is far more normal than most people.
Yeah.
And then there's that reduced fear of death. There's an anticipation then. They realize they may be going on, but they're not just going, their life isn't going to stop, but it's going to keep going. I think it's a far more peaceful death. The other kinds of effects of near-death experience is that there's people who died and they are resuscitated, they come back and they relate their experience. They have this incredible new appreciation of life itself. They say they'll spend more time looking for fine wines and taking art classes and learning things they had never learned before, because life is to be savored. And then they also have an increased compassion for others. They're not worried so much about themselves anymore. They're not near as contained, saying, I have to survive. It's, no, I'm going to survive. Now I can give myself to other people. Other effects is a lot of times people attend their institutions like churches less, but they'll tell me that they have an increased spirituality. They don't go to church anymore because they're afraid if they don't, they won't go to heaven when they die. But they also have a very high appreciation of church at the same time. And many of them tell me that they pray more than ever. And they look for places where they can meditate and be much more in touch. These are just some of the effects that people have, the responses. It changes their life. They're just a far more holistic life afterwards.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for relating those. I'm sure you have even more stories that you could share in terms of each of those. Do you feel free to share one or two to give an example that you could think of as a specific person, time, place?
Well, I'll tell you one.
Yeah.
It was about a dear woman I was helping out. She really was very afraid of dying. She said, I don't believe I'm going to go to heaven. My husband and I lived some really terrible lives. And she was frightened. She says, I'm not good enough for heaven. I know I won't go to heaven. And I all along said, no, it's all about grace. God forgives. And I was using her Methodist tradition, telling her, you're fine. That's what the whole point of Christ is about. And then one day she calls me up and said, come over, I want to tell you something. I come over to her. And she says, I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm thinking, man, I did a good job with this woman. But I said, okay, tell me about it. My ears are anticipating hearing good things for myself. But instead she said, now when I go to bed every night, right where the wall and the ceiling meet, a light starts to shine.
Oh boy.
The staff in this place, they leave me alone about 9:30, they leave, and this angel starts to appear up there. And because there's an angel up there on the ceiling looking down on me, I'm not as afraid. But help me understand this. Why is that angel there? And I said, well, what do you think? She says, no, I know what I think. You tell me what you think. And I said, this is a vision from God to tell you you're being watched and you're being loved. And that's what I think. That's why I'm not afraid to die anymore.
Wow.
An amazing thing, toward the very end of her life, there was no longer one angel, but there were 3 angels.
Wow.
And people who have lived in that room afterwards have said that they've seen those same 3 angels.
Wow. Wow.
So she was so much comforted. Her whole approach to dying was completely altered for the positive.
Wow. I'm trying to think this through. If ever I was in a situation like that, I wouldn't even know where to begin, what to do, what to say, even if I even felt free to even say it. How do you handle patients like that? They, for fear of being seen a little strange, maybe to their other hospital staff or to their own families. How do you handle visions just in general?
How do I handle
Or
them?
how do you encourage others to as well, as far as family members?
I think as a chaplain and other people who work with me, the nurses and the CNAs and the counselors, we've all learned to develop an aura of comfort and then trust. And then I often start just asking the simple ice-breaking questions. I'll ask them, do you see things you've never seen before? And they look and they start having a change in their face. Their eyes actually start twinkling. And they almost always ask me, is it safe? And I said, oh yeah. I've heard many stories and all of them are amazing, and I'd love to hear your amazing story. So it's always first get a level of trust built up, followed by just breaking that ice. Just a little bit is all it takes. Because they know I've been there before, and I'm not going to think they're crazy. But then we also educate the family. Also, even in our Pikes Peak Hospice booklet, we give families that give indication of what happens to a person when they're dying. We put that in there. It's stated in there that a lot of people will see loved ones before they die. So it's even written out. So it really has become much more acceptable.
Yes.
Probably not 10 years ago, but we certainly do now with the increased awareness from the media. So,
Do you think that's been one of the major influences or shifts in terms of this greater freedom, or are there additional things that you've seen?
well, I've seen it with the medium, Eben Alexander, Mary, I can't remember her name, Mary Neal, and a few others, but I think there's a shift in spirituality in our own country. Maybe this contributes to it, but it's also been generated by it. People are much more getting away from religion being a set of words and doctrines. The Logos was what I was taught. I should tell you, when I first started working in this, my own father said, but what does the Word say? And I said, it doesn't say a whole lot about it. But I'm experiencing it. He said, well, if it's not in the Word, you better just be quiet. My own denomination would have crucified me for this. They even said, if it's not in the Word, the Bible, then you're in trouble. Well, I think a lot of people are releasing themselves from that and saying, I have a spirituality that is mine, that no one else can define for me. And I will use those traditions yet. The Buddhists that I've worked with, the different types of Christianity, they're willing to work with it. But they're willing to say there is more than one authority. One is my own experience with it. So.
Wow, excellent. Enlightening, opening, refreshing, new. Thank
Totally.
you. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
This is a story about a boy, a girl, and the never-ending wonder of fate. The girl always wanted to be a dancer, and the boy always wanted to be a firefighter. As luck would have it, they enrolled at the same college, where the girl studied dance, and the boy studied fire science technology. One magical day, they met in math class, because no matter what your major, you need to take math. After graduation, the girl moved to the city to be a dancer, and the boy moved with her, because every city needs firefighters, and he had wanted to be one his whole life. With more than 200 programs, let Pikes Peak Community College help you find your passion. You never know where it might take you.
Welcome back. We're again at just an excellent session that we're having here with Dr. Stephen Alsam. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have some more questions that we wanted to ask him. Your discoveries and the countless experiences that you and others have cataloged don't exactly fit within this model of Western medicine. How receptive is the medical community to the mounting research that you and Mitch are doing and others?
Mitch and I have talked in numerous medical conferences around the country, and after every one of our presentations, we will get medical doctors coming up. I've yet to find one that really challenges what we've done, and most of them are grateful to us. Recently, Dr. Leister and I have been working on distinguishing hallucinations from visions, that there's a difference. And most medical communities are taught that any unshared sensory experience is how they define it. You're the only one who sees it, smells it, feels it. Any unshared sensory experience is automatically categorized as a hallucination. But now doctors are coming up and saying, no, not all of these things are hallucinations. They're starting to become aware of that. Mitch and I did a talk down in Santa Fe 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. And one doctor came up to me and says, I've been a total atheist and I've always believed any unshared sensory experience is a hallucination. And she is an obstetrician gynecologist, and one of her patients, she took out almost all of the woman parts from her and said, you have less than a 5% chance of ever having a baby. And the woman said to the doctor, Doctor, you're wrong. God has told me, and I've had visions that I will have children. And the doctor said, well, great, I sure hope you're right. And she did not believe it would happen. But a year later, the woman came back to her office, and she was pregnant. And the doctor could not believe it. And she realized that the woman probably was told these things, did not have a hallucination. She said, there's something completely different than that. Wow. And so she's just one example of many people who come up and say, you're absolutely right. They don't have, the people with visions do not have disturbing psychoses. There's not drug interactions, medical interactions. There's not a lack of sleep. They can't explain it in any other way, but they're saying there is something else. They're still not sure it is something from beyond. It might be something here, but that's why we have two physicists working with us. Keep us into challenging us, saying, yeah, you got to keep us grounded so we're not into what we call that woo-woo land. So.
Yeah. Wow. I have always wondered this question. Given the finality of death, why are people reluctant to deal with the issue of death, knowing there may be something on the other side? Or what's the nature of these fears, if it is just fear, or what's the cost of not dealing with it well? Any of those. take your pick.
I think the fear of death is something every human faces. We know that we have an origin, and we know we have a destiny. And certain cultures are more willing to embrace it. In America, we do not embrace that. Even today, we call it the youth culture. To me, that's actually part of a death culture, that we want to avoid death as long as we can. Let's keep kicking that can down the road. Let's keep the grim reaper away as long as we can. And that whole growing sense that I won't be here forever. But then we also have, behind our whole Western background, is a sense that there's either heaven or hell to pay afterwards. And which direction am I going to go? In my experience as a chaplain, it's not always the most religious people who are most comfortable with facing death even. Some of them are terrified of it because they're still not sure which way they're going to go. My experience as a chaplain, listening to people, has almost erased that fear for me, myself. I don't want to race to death yet, but I think when it comes, it's going to be an adventure. So I think there's an existential, it could be even, we were created or we even evolved to want to preserve ourselves. Even animals have evolved for preservation of the species. That's all part of who we are.
How about part of who we are as humans? Often we have regrets. How have you seen this enter into your work? Or
especially with people who are getting close to death. I like to use 4 questions. Tell them, get into these discussions with your loved ones. First, I am sorry, I love you, thank you, and goodbye. That's a way in which people can handle regrets. It's a wonderful way of saying, I'm sorry, I know I must have hurt you. And I think even I'm sorry can be self-forgiveness. Sometimes I wish I had taken some opportunities. I was offered to go to Amsterdam for equivalent of a doctorate program in philosophy, and I never took them up on that. And so I had to forgive myself for that. But I also need to ask for forgiveness for other people. I'd like to use those opportunities to ask for forgiveness. And that sometimes you realize, the time is too short. Let's just say you're human. What I love is the people who have near-death experiences, the people who die and then come back. They say that they went up to a life review place where they were able to look. Some people have described it to me as a table, and others say it's a regular place where they see in 3D their whole lives. And they look and they learn and they say, oh, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. But it's a helpful opportunity. When they come back, they don't feel the regrets anymore. They still know which mistakes they've made, but they would like now to, instead of go back, they want to go forward with a sense of, I'm not afraid I'm going to really mess this one up anymore.
Steve, with the final seconds we have left, in a nutshell, what should our viewers take away from what you've shared with us today? How would you answer that?
I would say don't be afraid of dying. That's easy to say. But condition yourself. I would read a few of the new books that are out on people who have near-death experiences and realize for most of us that will be our experience. We will see light. We will see a new life. We'll hear music we've never heard before. And life then also, when your fear of death is disappearing, you can enjoy life, savor life, because it's going to go on.
Fantastic. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. I enjoyed this, and hopefully you did too. So I just want to encourage you to maybe see this again. It'll be offered at various times. So thank you so much for joining us, Steve. It's been great to have you. And boy, hopefully we can get you back in a couple of years. And
absolutely.
You and Mitch, and
we keep adding on to our presentations every year. So if you heard one, you can go ahead and come back and you'll hear new materials, often just from the questions people ask at the presentations.
Excellent. Well, this is Bruce McCluggage at Pikes Peak Community College, the Philosophy Department, Dr. Steve Alsam. It's been great having you today.